Now remember, they can get information about properties if they were in an IDX without having to go through that step.
Without anybody.
That's right.
Can access information displayed on your website through IDX.
Right.
Because that doesn't require the broker-consumer relationship.
Right, and we're going to talk about a couple of other things that are going to be required. And it raises a point that you made earlier that, gee, there might be some brokers who elect not to go with a VOW, go with IDX, because it's going to be much easier for consumers to access the information than having to go through these layers.
You know, if I had to bet, and I'm not a betting man, but if I had to bet, I would bet that now that we have a clearer VOW policy, you still won't see that many VOWs. Because I don't think consumers necessarily want to jump through the hoops that are going to be required for them to have access to information made available to them through a VOW, because that information is available in so many other places on the internet without jumping through those hoops.
And they may not appreciate the fact that they might be able to get access to more information through a VOW than an IDX.
Right, they don't understand that.
No, they're just going click, click, and you want to be the one that captures their eyeball first.
Exactly.
And let's talk about another policy requirement. Participants' VOW must obtain the identity of each registrant and obtain each registrant's agreement to terms of use of the VOW as follows. Number A, a registrant must provide his or her name and a valid email address. The participant must send an email to the address provided by the registrant confirming that the registrant has agreed to the terms of use as described in section C below. The registrant may be permitted to access the VOW only after the participant has verified that the email address provided is valid and that the registrant received the terms of use confirmation.
So the next policy is that you have to get the participant, you have to get the identity of the person who's going to be accessing that information, who we would call the registrant. And you know why we call them the registrant? They have to register with you. Now, what they have to provide and what's being accepted as identifying someone is a valid email address. And so if the registrant provides a valid email address, agrees to the terms and conditions, and then the subscriber or the participant, the broker, then sends an email back to that registrant and it gets delivered, then that satisfies the requirement for establishing the identity of the registrant.
Okay, well that's...
Is that right?
Yeah, it's right, but what does it really mean, a valid email address? There doesn't seem to be a requirement that you get a notification that it has been received. Suppose it doesn't open it up.
Well, in my opinion, John Reilly, this is a hollow requirement.
Yeah.
Because what is being asked for, and all you need to access the VOW is to provide an email address that works. And so if you wanted to access someone's VOW, you could go to Yahoo and you could create a fictitious email account. Now it would work. You could go to Yahoo. Anybody can do this. You can go to Hotmail and do this. You can establish an email address, Mickey Mouse 1947 at yahoo.com. And you now have an email address. And then you could go to a broker's VOW and you could put, when it asks for the email address, you could put Mickey Mouse 1947 at yahoo.com. And then the broker could send an email back to Mickey Mouse at 1947 at yahoo.com. And if that email doesn't bounce, I guess that's verified or valid under this particular policy. So while this is included, it's hollow. It really does nothing to establish identity. And if you were really serious about establishing identity, you'd ask for a credit card number.
Well, speaking of...
Because you could tie that to a person. You can't tie Mickey Mouse 1947 to any individual. It's fictitious. It was a made-up thing. Now, really, if you wanted to be serious about this, you could tie it to the creation of a pseudonym, which is where you register with a third party. You don't tell people who you are, but you register with a third party, and so an identity has been established, it's just kept a secret. So MLSs and associations want to keep that term in mind because it might have some applicability in the future, and that is a pseudonym, and the establishing of a pseudonym to access a vow. But as it now stands, this is a stupid type of requirement. And it's only by people who really don't get it that would even come up with this kind of stupid, I told you there would be some editorial in here, but an idiotic, if you think about it, way to validate that somebody is your customer. Yep, Mickey Mouse 1947 at yahoo.com is my customer.
Well, Saul, tell us how you really feel.
Well, you know, it's like stupid.
Now, there's another requirement besides that's the stupid one, and that is...
But it's okay. I mean, that's acceptable, right?
But the registrant does have to confirm that they've opened up and they've read the terms of use. And so that's a requirement which can be handled digitally, as we'll find out in a minute. The participant must at all times maintain a record of the name and email address supplied by the registrant and the username and current password of each registrant. So there's a record-keeping requirement here that the records must be kept for not less than 180 days after the expiration of the validity of the registrant's password. Now, this is interesting for security purposes. If the MLS has reason to believe that a participant's vow has caused or permitted a breach in the security of the data or a violation of MLS rules related to the use by one or more registrants, the participant shall, upon request, provide to the MLS a copy of the name, email address, username, current password, and note this, an audit trail, if required, of any registrant identified by the MLS to be suspected of involvement in the violation.
So, I go back to the one that I thought was stupid. If you wanted to access the MLS and you used a Yahoo account that you could later abandon, well, maybe they could trace it back to your computer, huh, Tim? But what if you did it in a library computer? And so there are ways to game this by not requiring a real identity. And so we have always been advocates of a real identity, and it seems like nobody listens to that idea that if you're trying to put teeth in something that you can't put teeth into, because if people really want to use that data in an unauthorized fashion, and they have the intent to begin with, they're going to make up their email address. They're going to set up a false account that doesn't tie back to them. And if you really want to tie it back to them, you need something that would tie it back to them. What would tie it back to them? A credit card. See, nobody wants to even think, oh, they won't give me their credit card. Well, we're not going to take the money. We're not going to take their credit card money. We're just going to use that because we know the credit card relates to a real person. Now, an alternative to that, because I know taking credit card information creates a lot of potential liability, something that would work even better here is the creation of a pseudonym. Where you register with a third party, you get an identity that later can be tracked if need be. Right?
Yeah. That third party has to be a very trusted third party
source
in that situation.